Hi, Gerald508. How are you? It's July 4th, all right? So hopefully you guys are having a fun day where you're surrounding yourself with supportive people to reduce your stress in life, okay? And we're going to learn how important that is in subsequent weeks, okay? Today we're still doing some biology. I know you guys are kind of overwhelmed by the biology. I don't worry about it, and you shouldn't either, okay? You just need to be exposed to this because now you're going to become an informed consumer, which is awesome. You guys learn what you will learn. Um, and I think you're going to really enjoy the outcome of being exposed to all this. Okay, so what I want to do is to just do another quick run through. You guys have been doing really, really great on the discussions, and we started to read your journal articles. So awesome. I read Allison's article on gardening. It was just a bomb. It was so fun to read. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, guys, is we're gonna come over here, all right, and we're gonna look at our readings and then bounce back and forth and look at the discussions. So the readings are done first, and the discussions then apply what you have read. That's the way you're supposed to do it. So you do this first, and then you do this second. Okay, so if we come in here, we're gonna go on to the readings. Okay, what we're gonna see is this is the July 2nd week. So I'm July 4th, I'm a little late. We actually had to go to San Diego yesterday for Julia because she's had a lot of infections because of her leukemia. And so we had to go see a specialist immunologist down at UCSD that's going to work with the oncologist. Okay. And it was a vampire visit, 5 tubes of blood taken. Okay. So, what are we doing here? Okay, so I want to start with this. Okay, we're going to look at poor health effects of stress and cortisol in the body. Okay, so we're going to go boom, and we're going to start making the link to diabetes. All right, so you watch this really cool, simple video on stress. Okay, here's the second one, and here's the third one. Okay, I'm not going to watch these for you. They're short, they're made for the layperson, and they're absolutely wonderful. Okay. Then we have 3 articles that we have down here. Each time I try and list, we have the PDF file in Blackboard. That's right here. And then this is the actual URL. If you are interested, you can go to the website from where that journal was obtained. Okay. Not necessary to do both. I would just rely on the PDF file. All right. So I'm going to click on this article first. Okay, and I'm downloading, as you can see. Okay, and you can just look at the title. It says cortisol dysregulation and looks at the bidirectional link between stress, depression, and type 2 diabetes. So now we're building on what we've learned. So you guys learned all about the stress response. Okay, we learned about epigenetics. Okay, and how important was that was in terms of the internal regulation of how our bodies respond to cortisol. Okay, and that was the focus mostly of the epigenetics. We know that aging alters this. The landscape of epigenetics is also as well. And then specifically, we're focusing on just the one tag that is put on the DNA, and it was called the methylation tag. And in general, that decreases how genes are read. Okay, and then with stress, these get changed. Okay, and with aging, we see a kind of an overall reduction, which is bad because it puts us at risk for heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Too much reading, too many bad proteins. Okay, so we're looking over here. Okay, and they talk at the very beginning. They said a controversy exists over the role of stress and depression in the pathophysiology of diabetes. Okay, so we're going to focus in on type 2 diabetes. Okay, this is age-related. It happens late in life. That's what that means, and it's associated with initially with insulin insensitivity or insulin resistance. So there's 2 different ways of referring to that. It just means that, as we see right here, we have progressive insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes. And we see that this happens with clinical depression. So that's this mind-body connection, okay? And it's pretty scary, okay? So how do we get from clinical depression to type 2 diabetes? So the key element in here is, again, we're looking at this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, okay? We are also going to be looking at cortisol, as you see right here, okay? And now we're going to be bringing in a component that we're going to be talking about next week, okay? And these are the autonomic nervous system and immune systems, okay? All right, so all these systems get differentially recruited during stress, okay? And this abnormal autonomic nervous system and immune system function can also contribute to health declines like diabetes and we'll see later on vascular disease, okay? Alrighty, so that's the whole point of this, okay? We see that we have this, as we mentioned before, diurnal is another way of saying daily rhythm in our cortisol, okay? So we start off in the morning with very low cortisol, and then to give us a little giddy up in the morning to get going, boom, the cortisol rises up, and then it has a very consistent, regulated slope where it declines over the rest of the day, okay? Alrighty. And because of clinical depression and linked to chronic cortisol, we see changes, okay? So this is what this is all about. I want you just to read through this and relax, 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 okay? So they talk about the physiology of the Hpa axis. So again, I told you we're going to get this over and over and over again, and this is what it's talking about here, okay? So we look at the hypothalamus secretes the corticotropin releasing hormone, okay? And they, like I said, from the hypothalamus. Who talks to the hypothalamus? Remember, the amygdala during fear and rage and anger drives the hypothalamus. Okay, alrighty. The hypothalamus then communicates with the next guy, the pituitary, and that's where you have the HP of the Hpa axis, and that releases ACTH. ACTH then goes traveling through the bloodstream all the way down to the outer shell or cortex of your adrenal gland, and it causes the release of cortisol, okay? Key is once the stress has resolved, okay, the problem is over, we need to terminate this through this negative feedback loop, and the cortisol will go to the hippocampus, to the hypothalamus, and to the pituitary and say, shut this thing off, okay? We're focused on the hippocampus because that's where the most significant chronic cortisol pathology is seen, okay? But it does feedback everywhere, and we'll show you that later on, okay? So you can see how we just kind of read through this, okay? And then this is the next part that we're talking about. This is what's released from the autonomic nervous system. We're going to talk about that later. The catecholamines that can interfere with immune function, and interleukin-6, which also is a messenger released by the immune system that causes what's called inflammation. Okay, alrighty. So it goes through all this stuff right here. Okay, so this is what I've been talking about. Okay, here's the Hpa axis. Okay, elevation of cortisol causes insulin resistance. Boom. Okay, so many of you know somebody that has problems in terms of being a type 2 diabetic. Okay, that insulin resistance then would be reflected by elevated HbA1c. Okay, this is your hemoglobin. That's what HbA stands for. It's in your red blood cells. It's a protein that gets coated with glucose because you're a diabetic, and your insulin no longer takes the glucose out of the blood because you're resistant. Okay, you develop lots of intra-abdominal fat. Okay, this then causes an elevation of triglycerides. Okay, waist circumference. This is HDL. This I call it the happy version. That's why we call it the H. This is normally scrubbing your vasculature, getting rid of the triglycerides and cholesterol. It gets reduced by cortisol, okay, which is a bad thing, okay? And these are then the inflammatory guys, okay? And they are a major, major contributor along with this to vascular disease, okay? Alrighty, and there you have it. You have type 2 diabetes. So you can just work your way through these figures, okay? I'm not going to read through all this, okay? This is our diurnal rhythm that gets altered, okay? And we'll see another example in a subsequent paper, okay? So it's a beautiful, beautiful paper. We see right here, again, the rhythm has changed, okay? So we see we're looking at variability that's seen in research. Here, there's no change. Here's a blunting, okay? So diabetes showed less. And this has to do with the hippocampus being dysregulated, okay? All right, and that affects your diurnal rhythm. It's thought to be due to chronic, see, this is just um, a kind of a normal sleep-wake cycle, okay? But if we look at the chronic levels of cortisol, they can be elevated. This is the feedback that I was talking about. All right, so normally, okay, we have up here, the amygdala perceives a stress, okay? It could be hyperactivated because of clinical depression. You're just ruminating on problems you have, or it could be a real stress, okay? You just had surgery, or there's a lion that's going to attack you. It tells the hypothalamus to release this factor. This factor goes to pituitary. It releases this factor, gets into the blood, goes down to the adrenal cortex, and releases cortisol. Okay? Alrighty. Cortisol will go back here, 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 and here, and try and shut off the response. But as long as you have a perceived stress driving this, I'm still staring at the lion, I don't care about this, this is always going to keep churning and churning and churning. Or if you have clinical depression and you ruminate over your problems, even though the feedback is trying, this churns and churns and churns and causes this elevation of cortisol. Okay? Then we come down here to the body, and ultimately, this is not important for you, but the high cortisol right here causes the liver to increase dramatically its level of glucose. So now you have elevated blood glucose. Okay? It also goes down here and stimulates your fat cells to grow. So now you're going to get tummy fat, okay? Because of the elevated blood glucose, your insulin levels begin to increase and increase and increase, okay? And that's a natural response, like when you have a meal, okay? And then what happens is with the elevated blood glucose, okay, the insulin comes down here and it tells the fat cells, please take up the glucose, and it tells the muscle, please take up the glucose. And that's all good, and that's what's supposed to happen, okay? But unfortunately, you see over here in our muscle cells, we start getting insulin resistance. So it doesn't get taken up. It's not stored as a reserve, okay? Your fat cells grow and grow and grow, and you develop lots and lots of problems. Okay, so please just kind of look this over, think about this. It'll make perfect sense. All right, so that is an awesome article. All righty. So then we come over here, okay, and this is the second article, okay, so we come over here and we click on that, okay, and this is a review of how stress contributes to the development of diabetes, okay, all right, so I just kind of went through it last time, so we're just looking at it from another viewpoint. What's interesting about this article is it really gets into things like lifestyle and socioeconomic status, and it refers back to the video we watched with Sapolsky, okay? And it talks about the Whitehall study and that large epidemiology, looking at thousands and thousands of people, okay? All right, so it goes through the whole hypothesis. You see it talking about Hpa Axis, and then it talks about type 2 diabetes, again, being an inflammatory disease, okay? And I made reference to that last time. Okay, we look at conditions, okay, that are more likely. So we see clinically depressed are more likely to have type 2 diabetes, PTSD, okay? All these things all interact, okay? So this is the methodology that they use. And so what they did is they went back and they surveyed a bunch of other articles, okay? So they didn't generate the data on their own. They just went back and looked through all these wonderful articles and then collected and compressed the data. And so that's what this is all about right here. And then they made their conclusions, okay? So they talk about depression, okay, like I said right here, all right? And they talk about the mechanisms that are going on in terms of your Hpa axis, okay? We look at it, aggressive behavior and conflict, okay? Really, really important, okay? And we're going to summarize this later on in next week, okay? We see right here, we talk about social status, okay? Again, this goes back to the Sapolsky video and the Whitehall study, okay? Alrighty, and then it gets into the discussion, okay? And basically, this is a beautiful figure. Exposure to chronic stressors, okay, has a number of health adverse behaviors associated with it, okay? This causes this gigantic physiological stress response. You get inflammation, and then you get all these diseases that we see in aging that leads to these conditions, that leads to type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, okay? So just read through this and try and enjoy it, and not to get too wrapped up in the technicalities, okay? Because we don't, so you shouldn't either. And here's the last article, okay? Again, we're looking at this view from another viewpoint, okay? Just read it very, just kick back, okay, like I am right now. And I'm gonna just, just scan it, okay? And I'm gonna take in the whole concept. So we're gonna look at visceral obesity. They talk a lot in this article about Cushing syndrome. Cushing syndrome is an abnormal growth of the adrenal gland, okay? It's a hyperplasia, so it's a congenital disorder, okay, where suddenly the adrenal gland gets 5 times the size of normal, and it just starts pumping out cortisol. And what do we see in these people? We see physiological problems, diabetes, central obesity, heart disease, that look reminiscent of somebody that has clinical depression, okay? So it's a really neat kind of test bed for looking at elevated cortisol. All right, so now you look at the nature of the disturbance, as it says right here. We look at pathological consequences. We see that, again, something I talked about, but your fat metabolism, okay, is a big deal, okay? And this is all part of the metabolic syndrome. All right, so then we see this kind of simple figure that just shows you genes and environment, they interact, okay? Are you genetically predisposed to be clinically depressed? There are a number of genes that cause clinical depression and anxiety. It is what it is. And then you have certain environmental conditions, behavioral. Somebody's been really mean to you, okay? And that then triggers this hyper stress response that does all these things that we've talked that we can see down here. Boom, 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 boom. Okay? Alrighty. That's the point of that article. So that's kind of it. And then, so now that we're all experts on this, what we now do is we come over here to the discussion. Okay? Alrighty, and we look at the prompt. Okay? Alright, it says, please consider what we learned about up to this point. Okay? So this is right here. We learned about epigenetics and stress. Okay? You can talk about it in this discussion. Okay? And look at the articles, and we're gonna think about the concept of stress and those glucocorticoid receptors in the hippocampus. Okay, remember, they downregulate, and so you can't turn off the stress response. Okay, all right. So we see I refer to different figures in here. Just flow with it. Okay, this is something that we've talked about right here, and you guys did a great job about the amygdala, okay? And remember, in stress, it gets bigger, okay? So it's more likely to drive the Hpa axis, and the hippocampus, okay, shrinks, okay? That's the feedback mechanism, so now it's not as effective. And our prefrontal cortex, or frontal cortex, you can call it either one, it shrinks, and that's the one, our common sense part of our brain, that tries to shut up the amygdala. If it shrinks, the amygdala takes over, it hijacks our entire body, and we get the problems. Okay, so that's what that is. And you just kind of go through this, and you're going to do just fine. All right, now we're going to go back to the readings, okay? And we're going to come up to the next week right here. okay? And this one right here is diabetes and vascular disease, and we're going to talk about related pathologies, okay? We get in here, this is a wonderful website, the link works. I'm going to click on it right here. Okay, and it just goes through all the different types of chemicals chemicals, hormones that are involved in regulating your blood glucose. All right, this one right here, this GLP-1, okay, is of particular interest. Okay, these guys are related. Okay, they're called incretins. They're secreted by the gut. Okay, and during a meal, and they enhance your insulin release. Okay, alrighty, and so the reason this is important, there are a number of new class of drugs that are used to treat diabetes, so that you take these guys right here that look like these GLP-1 molecules, so that when you do have a meal, you're going to have a much greater natural insulin release, and that's what that's all about. Okay, so it kind of explains it right here. Okay, so in comes my meal, boom, 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 boom. It increases this GLP or GIP, either one of them. Okay, they get elevated in my blood now. Boop, 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 boop. They come over here and they bind to my pancreas, and when they bind, you get this maximum release of insulin. Okay, alrighty, very important. Okay, and they also decrease the glucagon. Okay, so the glucagon is a signal that we secrete when we've had no meal, and it tells the liver, come on, give me some glucose. But when we just had a meal, we're telling the liver, come on, package the glucose for later. Okay, so you can just kind of go through that step by step by step by step. Okay, this talks about another one called epinephrine. Okay, I'm not going to go through this, but just go ahead and sift through that pretty simple description. You're more than welcome to go through here. We're just focusing in on this area right here. But if you click on this, it'll take you to a lot of different areas. Okay, alrighty. So then when we get done with that, we want to look at what happens when you have diabetes. When you have elevated blood glucose, okay, it causes direct damage to blood vessels. When you have this increase in tummy fat and inflammation, you have problems in vascularity, and then that impacts all kinds of different parts of our body. So as we see right here, it increases heart disease and stroke. And we saw it also did it through lipids. Increases kidney disease. This is right here. This all has to do with the vasculature right here. Kidney disease is a vasculature disease. Diabetic neuropathy is a vascular disease, along with an immune dysfunction disease, foot problems, eye disease, on and on and on. Okay? All right, so just go ahead and look through that. I want you guys to click on it like so, and you look over here, okay? And you see over time, high blood glucose from diabetes will directly damage the blood vessels, and via those other mechanisms of tummy fat and inflammation, that also will damage the blood vessels. Okay, alrighty. All right. So then, once you've gone through this, there's a real simple article that is kind of behavioral. All right. So this is the PDF file that we've made for this, and it talks about high stress, hostility, depression, and it just talks about some amazing statistics right here to think about, or for people that are clinically depressed, for people that have had chronic stress in terms of their likelihood of having a stroke, or a small stroke warning called a transient ischemic attack. Okay, so pretty amazing stuff. All right, you get done with that. All right, we come back over here. We're going to go back over here to the discussion. Okay, we're going to come back down here, and now we're going to go and talk about what happened here. So this is the second week where we look at the review of diabetes mechanisms from the UCSF website, and then we talk about our exposure to all the different diseases associated with diabetes. Okay, and then that short article and what you think about these statistics. Okay, so you guys are going to learn a lot. It's amazing. Now, We did have a couple students that were beginning to notice that we're going to have the midterm coming up right here. So if you click on that, okay, it's not here. It will be released, okay. I talked about it over here in the readings. So this is July 11th. We come back here to the readings, okay. I kind of just interposed it right here, just reminding you that the first midterm open book, open world is lectures 1 through 6. You have 2 hours to get 30 questions done, okay? And this is July 11th, not but a T. I'll fix that. Okay, and then the last one that covers the second half of the course is July 30th, okay? Alrighty. One of the students asked for a study guide, so we have developed a study guide, and we see this right here, okay? And what the study guide is, it just kind of goes through, it's kind of the key elements that you should know. Pretty easy, straightforward stuff. We're going to send that to you as well, okay? Alrighty. So that's my lecture for this week. I hope you had a great 4th of July. I know none of you are going to be looking at this today, but this is to help you out through the remainder of the week. Okay, and with that, I am